Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Jessika Jake. Hi, Jessika.
Hi.
I'm so excited. I am so super excited. I got to meet Jessika last year at the Ions event where she had a booth and she was doing all this cool stuff. Because I was working as a volunteer, I never get to do everything at these events. Maybe next year I'll just go to it. But what I'm excited to learn about, and of course it's so perfect for Conscious Business Zone, is her process called Superconscious Leadership. And this workbook, you can see I've got all these post notes in it. We'll go through some of it maybe. But okay, so Jessika, you have an incredible resume. I guess I could read a little bit of it, but let me just say that you're an international speaker and trainer. You include speaking at the Host Leadership Convention in Munich in 2019 and the AATH Convention in spring 2019 and training for the U.S. Air Force in Italy. She's a strategic leader for decades, attaining several awards and certifications. She's experienced working with Fortune 100 and 500 startups, small to mid-sized agencies, and nonprofits. A oneness experience during non-dual meditation revealed a training shortcut, intuition, and connection with spirit. She now works at the nexus of superconscious leadership, wellness, and personal development. I stole that off the Iron site. But
Cool.
well, so Jessika, please share your journey with us, because seriously, you guys, you're going to want to get this book and you're going to want to give it to your colleagues because of the creative nature. This is training with fun. This is, which means you'll remember it better. But okay, so I've said enough. Jessika, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I have tons of that whole alphabet soup after my name, but I was brought up by a math teacher and an English teacher and test prep. Like we were built for taking tests, and we were rewarded greatly for getting great scores on tests. And I'm one of those natural helpers, which way back when I was in New York, it just sounded lame, like, oh, you're a natural helper, but it's a true personality style where you just love to help. If you like the disc personality profile, it's the S, the supportive type where you like harmony and helping. So I was always making it fun to learn. And anytime we played games in the house, it was always, I was Miss J, the teacher. And my sister to this day, I mean, I'm 5 years older than her, 6 years older than my brother. I made up these songs to the Beach Boys for calculus equations. I bet she could still sing them to this day. So we were always doing, I was always taking it all in because I love to learn, but then sharing it out in a fun way. And that's what this book really is. It's like this mix of, my background is biochemistry because I loved getting into the nitty gritty of everything, seeing where every electron went and why on the deepest level I could find. And back when I got my degree, we weren't into all of the quantum physics like we are now, et cetera. So I was into biochemistry. I got into wellness mostly because I worked somewhere super toxic and it was just too hard on my body and had to figure out how to get out of that hole. And I know it's interesting because you're mentioning the ions. I did have a shallow near-death experience where I was choking and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk. And I think it was in 2011. And I popped out of body and I was somewhere, timeless and warm and didn't care to go back into my into my body or anything like that. But someone Heimlicked me real quick and I was back in my body. So it was a very cool experience, but it wasn't something that I would say was life-changing. The non-dual series that you mentioned is actually free online. I went to a site called deconstructingyourself.com. And Michael Taft posted a whole in one page, like this 20 videos or so nondual meditations. It was early in the COVID pandemic, where that was happening, and I got furloughed. And so here I am, no work for 2 weeks. And I decided to go down the list of his videos like every day, every morning. And it must have been by the 6th, 7th, or 8th video that I had that incredible like non-dual experience. And it changed my brain. It changed my wiring like a light switch. And I was so fascinated by that I was chasing down all, of course, I love the book stuff, right? There's like the human aspect that loves to learn and loves the book stuff. And then there's the other aspect where, like none of that even matters. I could just have that experience and tap into oneness whenever I want, right? And, but still, trying to make sense of it in a physical way, and came into like so many good things, including havening techniques, which is based on neuroscience and uninstalling trauma encodings from your neurons, and some of the other stuff that I already knew. If you like the featherometer in that book, it's based on polyvagal theory, and I've been using that. Actually, that was part of my talk in 2019 for the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're talking too fast because you're from New York. But
Exactly.
Because I mean, each thing that you go over is quantum. Okay, so for you, your perspective of life and work and play is multidimensional, and that you are the empowered leader of your movie. You are the director. You get to experience it, right?
Sure.
Okay. And so you've created these processes and these this book's like a workbook where you're taking us along as you explain principles, but it isn't the traditional business model. It is multi-level and fun. So that's the first part I wanted people to understand, is when you use super consciousness and we talk about quantum physics and all that stuff, it's like, oh no, it's going to be hard to do. This is opposite of that. This is totally opposite of that. This is, how do you bring out the best and the most joyful energy in people so that they participate in whatever they're sharing, their work, their play, from fun, right? From joy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's, I wanted people to understand that, because I'm sorry to criticize you going fast, but you just, I mean, I'm reading the book. So I was like, yeah. And I've had I didn't have a near-death experience. I had a spiritually transformative. I've had multiple, but a big one that I still remember every day. So I know what you're talking about. It's an expanded view of reality that allows you to realize that this little torso, this little body is so little of what you really are. Mm-hmm. And that magnificence can be accessed and brought in as a problem solver now, right?
Sure. Yeah. Like it could just guide. I mean, it's the simplest thing. And let me know if you agree, but I've come to look at it as love is the one truth, and the one truth is the frequency of love. And anything that is unaligned or you don't like has just been imprinted otherwise. I was even talking to the concierge I don't know if it was a concierge, I think it was, at that little desk at the hotel.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about all these dreams he is having, and he thinks he's going places in his sleep. And I'm like, yeah, you probably are. But he had some fear around some of the entities he was meeting. And when I told him, like, they can't touch you, like, if you stay in that frequency of love, they have nothing on you. They can't. And he was like, his face like just changed. He's like, really? And I was like, really? Right? Like picture even the tiniest little flashlight in the biggest sea of darkness, that darkness can't touch your light. And Shaman Durek once said something about being the eye of the storm. And I think as we are connected more and more and more to the superconscious, that we're able to be that eye in bigger and bigger and bigger storms. So I kind of doodle it like a swirly cyclone with a heart, right? There's that saying, people say it doesn't get easier, you get stronger. But with this, it's not even about getting stronger, because that sounds very materialistic. It's about connecting to that one truth and staying in that one truth. And then you could show up in bigger and bigger and bigger storms. And in that way, we go out and we amplify love in the world. We call back to love that which is unaligned, and we're able to be a guardian of love. So it's that simple.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think truth is simple, and but this is again talking about love and talking about unity in business. I have interviewed in the past 4 years. I've interviewed a lot of amazing business authors that have used Love is the Killer app. And then Stephen Farber had Love Make It Your Business, or I think that was his. And so love is actually, when people have brought it into business as servant leaders, it really does affect the bottom line. But see, let's start here. So in here, you have this cool picture of this human, and you say, from Nassim Haramein, you said, if you remove the empty space from all the atoms of all the people, the entire human race would fit in the volume of a sugar cube. Okay, blow your mind. Okay, so so that's, but we're so attached to the physical. Could you talk a little bit about how you get people to not be attached to the physical, that journey from that, like, oh no, this is the problem, or the story with it?
Yeah, you
Talk
know,
about that?
there's different ways of doing it. And one of the things I've seen, you could look up these, if you even Google sand on a woofer, you'll find it in
Yeah.
YouTube. And it shows that they put sand on the speaker, because I don't know audio technology, but they put sand on the woofer. And depending on the frequency they're playing, you get all these different patterns. One might be stars, one might be circles, one might be diamonds within diamonds. And it shows, like, literally the sound waves are changing the way the sand is showing up. And that's really what's happening when we zoom in, and we understand that there's so much more empty space, and it's not really empty, it's full of energy, than matter. And to then say, like, wow, Dr. Dean Radin, did experiments at Princeton University, etc., looked at putting intentions into tea, into chocolate, into water, and even in double blind experiments, those intentions played out to have a statistically significant difference in, like, what's a healthy plant versus not. And so people just, first they hear that, they think, like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But if you think about the sound waves vibrating and the sand changing, and then you think about just that, like, how much empty space, like if we took the whole entire earth and took out the empty space from the atoms, we would shrink down to the size of the Roman Colosseum. So that is a lot of, quote, empty space. It's not empty. That's the first thing that confuses people. It's full of energy. So if we're using the power of intention, we're touching all that energy. And I don't know why it works, but it works. And you can look at experiment after experiment. Noetic.org does all these kinds of super scientific validated studies, and just starting to see, like, wow, that matters more than matter, right? And we've grown up with the theory, not knowing it's just a theory, that matter is at the foundation of everything. And from physics comes chemistry, and from chemistry we get biochemistry and biology, and humans and dogs and whatever, And they try to say that, and it's a theory, so they're allowed to say what they want, that consciousness just somehow happens in a brain. But we say the opposite. We say, wait a second, it's all about the energy. That's the foundation. Conscious awareness is the foundation of everything. And then from that comes the physical. And so we don't have to try to explain, like, where does consciousness come from in a body? We say, no, it's projected through a body. And you said that before, like you had that experience and you realize how little this is. I'm going to give you another Shaman Dork quote because he's so good with the quotes. He said that you're like you are a spiritual giant crammed into a teeny weeny thumbelina of a body.
Yeah.
And so you go to these IONS conferences, you hear the same thing over and over again of how much more information we have access to outside of the body versus when we're protected through this body, or whichever way you want to look at it. Like, the terminology is tricky sometimes, but that's painting the picture. So I think once you get people to say, like, materialism or physicalist is one view, and we're saying, no, we're taking a more quantum perspective and saying conscious awareness is at the foundation. And then now, and it helped me so much because before I started really sorting this out and really knowing it, and that knowing means you really know it and experience it, I would think that all those spiritual experiences or paranormal experiences I had, I would kind of point to them and say, oh, this thing happened to me when I was little, and that thing happened to me, and this other thing happened to me, and this other thing happened to me. And like, how do I make sense of it all? But now I know it was more connecting to the foundation, to that one truth, to that one super conscious. And everything that people say is, or everything we define as paranormal, can be explained when we take on this post-physicalist theory. So you have a choice of what theory to believe. We don't know that when we're growing up. We're just kind of just taught that, matters where it's at least my generation. Like I was saying, because I graduated college in 1992. Yeah.
Well, I think what happens is the opportunity to have this expanded view is how we're going to problem solve and create new systems. And that's why I love this book, because it's more than servant leadership. Servant leaders, by definition, are leaders that spend a lot of time nurturing and growing their employees as much as they spend time nurturing their relationship with their customers. And then they don't always have enough time for themselves or resources. And time is a resource. But if they have this expanded view, the expanded view that I have is I'm projecting this from that quantum me, from that. And that, so if I have an elbow that doesn't feel good, I can work on figuring out what it is in that projection that can change it. But I don't know that people realize that it is that simple, or that it is accessible to them.
Right.
So how do you get them to know it's accessible? I mean, this is definitely a workshop, very, very beautifully designed to flow you into a new awareness. So how do you do it?
Well, you could sprinkle good stories along the way. So I could tell you like a pathway, but I do want to say too that when we point back to someone like Thomas Edison, who'd fall asleep with ball bearings in his hand, steel ball bearings on purpose, sitting in a chair, so that they'd fall to the floor, make a big clang, wake him up, and he'd get the answer to his problem, right? So that's tapping into another layer of consciousness. I would say super conscious. Some people might discard it as merely the subconscious, but it shows that we could get in these altered brain states and get other information, right? And so people are fascinated by that. But the reality for the American worker, and this comes from the American Stress Institute, is that 83% of us are in chronic stress mode in the workforce. And before the pandemic, the numbers they were posting was 75%. Now it's 83%. So when you ask, like, how do you get people to see this? Well, the first thing we have to do as leaders is help get them out of that chronic stress mode.
Right.
And so that's where the little red, yellow, green polyvagal theory, and it's very simple. Like, we are very familiar with the yellow, which is the mobilization for fight or flight. And when our body goes to fight or flight, it's all about immediate survival. So we're not sending a lot of oxygen to our smarty pants brain. We say, well, immune system, we don't need you right now. Let's shut you off. Digestive system, don't need you. Reproductive system, bye. And that's okay for immediate survival. But now we have people locked in there, locked in that mode. And that's why we see people getting sick across all these different systems of their body. So first, showing them that you care, teaching them something like this, showing them that, like, hey, that's where Americans are trapped right now. And we're going to get you out. We're going to bust you out. And then they know you care, and they see this light of, like, wow, you're right. This is what's going on for me. And I want to get to that physiology of safety and connection and what works for me. And so you really let them explore this. And there's so many great resources out there. I did make it silly with the featherometer. Why? Because they're all stressed out. Why am I going to start saying, let's talk polyvagal theory? Like, their brain can't handle it. And so we show them the little yellow bird that has its dukes up and the ruffled feathers. And then we show them the soaring green bird that's flying high. And so that's the first spot I would start, would be to let them figure out where they're at and gain that self-awareness. And, like, where am I at? What's my home base? Let's try to get my home base to that healthy social engagement system where I have access to my smarty pants creative brain, and then all my systems are up and running and my whole entire body is up and running in the healthiest way. And having those conversations and making it okay if there's something going on, some kind of creative tension or conflict, that, hey, I'm going to step outside and get myself to green, right? So it's something that we want to be able to do in the moment. It's something we want as our home base. And that's really the first stage of the game. And servant leaders do this too. They're healing those who they lead. That's part of what servant leadership is. And also they say it's ultimately creating a more just and caring world when you're a servant leader. So you don't have to walk into work saying, I'm a super conscious leader. You could say, I'm a servant leader, and apply some of the stuff that you like, that you hear from me or you read in my book or what have you. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the reason why I do this show and I focused on this is I really think business is how we're going to turn everything around, because businesses affect so many people. So it's a lot faster than one by one popping people into their consciousness. Because if the leader gets it, then they want the environment to represent it as well. So, okay, so I got another post note I want to ask about. Okay, so this is on page 117. Timothy Wilson, author of Strangers to Ourselves, tells us that at any given second, there are 11 million pieces of information being registered by our subconscious mind. Care to guess how many pieces our conscious mind can handle? 40. Only 40 can make it to the movie in our mind's eye. So 11 million any second. So okay, so let's talk about, because we're talking about super conscious and subconscious and conscious. Could you give us a little bit of a definition so that most people here have done hypnosis and they have some grasp to it, but could you give us a little explanation of this, please?
Sure. Yeah. So when it's tricky because I would say, like, everything's foundation in conscious awareness, and then here we're using the word conscious in a different way. We say when we have that consciousness, that's our normal waking. Like, we're aware of it, like in our mind's eye. The movie in our mind's eye is like we're conscious in our day to day. Subconscious is that behind the scenes, like you're saying, screening all that information for us. And then superconscious taps even deeper into more of a connected to a larger consciousness system. Meaning, I look at it as, when I talk superconscious, it's not only like my spirit that I'm connected to, but it's connected to and could connect even deeper and deeper to like even more spirits or even deeper consciousness. So you're tapping into the whole big thing there. So different levels. And so we see books on altered states and altered brain states, and being able to get from this conscious waking going around state, which is beta brainwaves, to getting to alpha states where we could tap into, we have a waking psychic ability to tap into things. And the Silva Ultramind like really has shown that over and over again. So that's something I think people are starting to use in business. Even a learning and development book I was reading, I could probably grab it off the floor over here because I have a bookshelf behind me. He was talking about Silva Ultramind and lucid dreaming. And I was just like, what? Because like that's right. It's I love it when other people are connecting this to their work and their field.
Right.
So
Well,
yes, that's basically my definitions.
that's wonderful. So the subconscious is somewhat programmed from your DNA or from your heritage, from your programming that you got as a child, 0 to 7, and that subconscious shows up in the conscious perspective. It's like you have a lens that you're looking through, and the subconscious is running it. But there's ways to clear those programs. Yay, thank goodness. Now. So you're saying your system is TIQI. So is it TQ chi? Is it chi? Is it QI chi, or is it?
No. So
Okay.
we don't. This is another topic, but an important one. So I think it's okay to switch gears.
Okay.
TIQI stands for trauma informed, quantum informed,
Okay.
and we have to be trauma informed. And it actually ties into what you're saying right now, because everything about, I call the body the biological spacesuit, but everything about it is seeking to be helpful. It has helpful intent, but it's either helpful, meaning truly helpful, or helpful. Like being locked in ever stressed mode, your biological spacesuit is like, oh, well, we've been triggering this response over and over. Let's just make this our home base. And now let's make neutral faces appear to us as threats because it's a dangerous world out there, right? And let's just stay in this yellow. And the same thing with the subconscious programming, like when we were kids, that's just learning to helpfully keep us alive and help us in, as things that are happening again in the future that are similar, to help keep us safe. So it's always, I always, in the book, you see it's like helpful, right?
Right.
And then how do we call that back to love, if you get back to the terminology? How do we release that imprint? You mentioned hypnosis. That's a beautiful way. I love havening techniques as well. There's lots of ways to do it, but the ways that work quicker, and you said something too before about your elbow and tapping into the I forget what term you used, but basically tapping into the bigger energy system, you were able to like get information, right? And so instead of hammering at the top with like, I'm going to just change my thoughts and say this over and over and over again to myself, like we're going where it's at, right? We're going all the way down. As deep, the deeper you go, the quicker you're going to get like an effect, right? Not saying that the cognitive reframes don't work, because they do, especially in cases where we just heard something our whole lives, and now you're saying, oh, well, wait, I don't like that anymore, I'm just going to shift it. And if you could do that, and it takes like 7 times or 12 times or whatever to just change your thinking, then you're good to go. But like some of the things that are happening are because of that behind the scenes scanning, are because we have trauma encodings in our brain, so that we're ready for not only the similar event, but any of the things that were going on at that same time. So our amygdala is saving information about the smells and the sights and the sounds and what's going on in our body, not just the threatening content. So we're encoding threatening content, whatever scared us, and then we're encoding all the periphery information. And so if you ever had a case where there was something and you're like, well, why am I so scared every time, I see someone with red hair? And it was because someone with red hair tried to rob you in a parking lot, right? And now every time you see red hair and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? It's not actually, so your body's being helpful in that case. And we could erase that and we could uninstall that. So, but we have to come at it with acknowledging, at least the way I find to be the most effective, is to acknowledge that helpful intent, have the curiosity there, and then take it from there, right? So I know you like, maybe you want to chat about hypnosis. I'm not super, I love hypnosis, but I'm not the expert on it, but it's certainly very powerful.
What I wanted to ask, because I have so many questions, is about the ego. You do have a little bit about the ego not being the bad guy, but we talked about the subconscious, the conscious, and the ego's got to be in this conversation somewhere here, don't you think? So could you talk a little bit about the ego and the role that you see it playing?
Sure. I loved that Dr. Wayne Dyer said ego is earth guide only. So now you have this helper that is helping you in this body, right? And what's really interesting, and if you reflect on this, you'll probably find it to be true, is we're not a mono mind. We're not just one personality, that we have sub-personalities. And if you've ever said, part of me wants to go to the gym, but another part of me just wants to go sit by the pool with my dog, you understand there could be these little personalities popping up. And so taking from Dr. Wade Dyer, I called them egos and say like egos are the helpers. Like, so we have these earth guide onlys, plural. And what is great when you acknowledge this and you're able to, again, figure out what's the helpful intent of this one little ego that's popping up, because it's always going to have a helpful intent. Now, this matches over to something called internal family systems. And this is really the gold for super conscious leaders or conscious leaderships, conscious businesses, because Dr. Richard Schwartz, and he started this in the 80s, it's completely evidence-backed at this point. You can't even get into a training. I was on the waiting list for years and never got in, and then they changed it to a lottery system. But internal family systems, saying we have these parts, we have multiplicity of mind, but there's also a part that's not a part, which is self. And he talks about self and self energy. And so we don't have to just say the things that we hear over and over again from people, like, you can't prevent your thoughts, or you have this saboteur, or this, or this, or this. And just kind of chasing it away and playing whack-a-mole. Even in my brain health certification training, Dr. Amen talked about the automatic negative thoughts. And it was kill the ants, kill the ants, kill the ants. And it's just this never ending game of like whack, 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 whack. Well, with internal family systems, again, with compassion and curiosity, you get to know these parts. How do they think they're helping you? And then go through a process where they could release those roles, because they probably took on those roles at a time in your life when that was really, truly helpful. And then it's stuck with you. And to your point earlier, a lot of that is from your childhood. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So you could have internal harmony. You could have an internal fam that's kind of quiet. And when you say, I'm going to do my non-dual meditation, teamwork makes the dream work, take a break, fam, they're quiet for you. So that's one thing. And it's also trauma-informed, a super trauma-informed approach as well. So ego is not the enemy. And you have all these parts, but none of them are your enemy. And the idea here is that they're probably carrying a burden. So this is the same thing. Call it back to love. Like, how do we get them to drop that, whatever's imprinted with something other than love, and take on a role that's more beneficial for the whole entire system? IFS would save the world if everybody got into IFS, I have no doubt, like, that would just save the world, save everything, every issue on the planet. It is the greatest thing. I make no money for telling you this. Internal family systems. There's the trainings are hard to get into. However, there's other books, free videos, books. So many great people share it. When I was at IANS, I was walking over to get coffee outside of the hotel, and I was thinking about compassion and empathy. So when you have compassion, and they do brain scans, I think Martha Sweeney did brain scans of like what lights up when you have compassion versus empathy. When you show up with empathy, it actually lights up some of your pain centers. So that more matches to like a part of us. But when you show up with compassion, that's where you're tapped into self energy. And I do equate self energy with spirit or quantum self. And so we're that eye of the storm, in other words, right? You hear people all the time saying, I absorb this energy and I absorb that energy, and it's draining, and I'm sensitive and this and that. But if you could tap into that compassion, which is a natural quality of self, then you could be, again, that little heart-shaped eye of any gigantic or bigger and bigger and bigger storms. And IFS is a great way to get you there, like for reals. So it's like we want to show up more with compassion than empathy. Also, compassion comes with what could I do to help versus empathy of like, I feel the heaviness of your pain. And it's like, compassion's like, wow, acknowledging it, caring, and wanting to take action. So I think that's another big shift as well.
Oh, it's fabulous. I do think that in my experience of doing business with small businesses, well, some large ones, because I was with Arthur Anderson and the Change Enablement Group. I managed 80 people. But anyway, what I found is most businesses do have a family dynamics to them.
Oh,
And you fall into your role, like not that you want to, but you do. But I wanted to go to another thing because you kind of segued perfectly for me, and it's on page 31, and it's part of leading with purpose, vision, and mission. And
yeah.
you have amplify love, and you just kind of segued perfectly into it. So people who and products and services that amplify love, peace, joy, connection, healing, growth, evolution, safety. Another bullet, amplify love via healing, creating, training, developing, teaching, aggregating, synthesizing, sharing, facilitating, supporting, consulting, counseling, coaching, mentoring. It's like, yes, yes, yes.
Those are check boxes on purpose, right? Like,
well, okay. So this is a whole different way of experiencing this experience here. It's when you put on the hat of I am here to amplify love, not that I am here for this huge mission, because the mission, the near-death experiencers over and over again said, no one's judging you.
right.
That whole religious what programming, I guess is the right word, that you better be good now so you can go to heaven later. This is all heaven, depending on how you play the game. And that's here's a learning environment. You stood in line to get these bodies to be here right now during this huge change time. But the concept of that everything is for you, and that everything, if you know how to ask your environment for support, everything can amplify love. But we weren't ever taught that. We were taught, and the past 3 years has been the fear virus. I mean, it's been like, be afraid, stay away from each other. So okay, so let's go to amplify love. How do we do it? You've shown, because I'm right here. It'd be my Girl Scout pledge here, because I feel that that's why we are here.
Yeah.
Was to make a difference and to amplify love, and that this is a everything, that the universe is conspiring for me.
Yes. Yes. And even if you mess up, it's a self-correcting universe.
Exactly.
So this goes back to what I was saying before, where it's as simple as like love is all there is, the only answer, and all that matters. And love is the in the book, it's called the foundation rule, that love is the one truth, right?
Right.
And then from that comes a threefold mission to amplify love, call back to love that which is unaligned, and to be a guardian for love. So we're not these pushovers, but we could put it up and say, nope, you're not you're not imprinting this love with something other than love today, you know? So being a good steward and a good protector, but from that willful with a capital W, like this, the will of spirit, not the will of ego, right? So when you're looking at that list, that I will just back up to say, this book would not exist had I not been asked to talk on at IANS. And I had an earlier draft. It was kind of a mess because I've been doing this kind of stuff, like you saw. You know, I chose the Air Force. I did this. I did that. I've always been infusing these things, like where I worked or who I was sharing, whatever I was teaching, if it's project management, service management, what have you. But now it's like, let's just bring this to like, this is the philosophy we're showing up with, and we could integrate this as we need to wherever we work. So I had this, you know, kind of mishmash version that I wasn't going to really do anything with. And then I started to want to get organized for my talk. And I was like, well, let me see what all this information I have. And then it struck me. So one of the certs I have is IDLE SL, which is strategic leader. And it takes a lot to get to that level. But at the heart of it is looking at exactly what you started this part of the conversation off with, is like, as a business, right, we have a purpose. Like, why do I have a business? I have these wrist rollers in the background, like why? And then also, you know, from that, we could look to the future of what's the vision. Like, so what is the vision of my business? Where are we going? That's going to be very love aligned. That's going to be some kind of amplification of love in the world, right? And so we have a mission, which is in the now. And in the simplest sense, it is to amplify love, call back to love that which is unaligned, and to be a guardian for love. But then what does that look like when you're like, oh, this is so simple, love's the answer, but like, what does that mean actually for my business? So that's why, like, as you were reading down the list and there's little, you know, check boxes next to it, is like, does my business serve to amplify love in the world? Like, wrist roller, I would say, is more of a calling back to love because it's for your achy wrists, right? And where people are rolling their feet on it. But it is, right? It's helping people. And we used to say, feel awesome, do awesome, right? So in a way, it is amplifying love in the world. And so it's just these ideas. Like, I know someone, she's very spiritual, but she is someone who works in HR, and she's always just putting up the fight, no matter how high up someone is or whatever. She's there to make sure everything's right and everything's good, and you're not tainting anything. And so she's one of those more focused on being that guardian of love. I mean, I think we're all a mix of all three. And I did make a little quiz on my site, but that's where you could say, like, okay, this is what specifically for me amplifying love looks like for my business, right? So yeah, so that's why that whole section exists, and why there's like page upon page. You could skim it and be like, oh, that's what I'm about, you know, or that's what I want to do, right?
Right. Well, they're good. It's a good reminder, and it's not coming from anything's wrong. It's like you're better and betterer.
Yeah.
Because these are choices. People forgot that they're not a victim of circumstances, that they're actually in the driver's seat, and they forgot to claim that creativity. And the fun of it, honestly, when I first met you last year, you it seemed like, what's she doing? She's playing games over there. What?
Plays the way. And people came over to us last year and were like, oh, this is for kids. I'm like, no, let your kids do it. I mean, you probably remember this. Let me just hop off screen.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it is literally the biological spacesuit. But even the things you're talking about, like when we have trauma, it literally gets encoded in our brains. It's installed as an ion channel, a receptor that pops up from the cell membrane in the neurons, in the nerve cells, in the amygdala, and they get super glued there. And like I was saying, it's not just the threatening content, it's everything about the situation. So now this is still that behind the scenes before you're even aware. Your body is zapping that trauma response to be helpful to you. And there's other things that happen, and we see this at work, the learned helplessness. I made a joke. I was at a very toxic workplace, and sometimes you use humor to veil your pain. And I saw someone give up on trying where she always tried before. I'm like, oh, she's got learned helplessness. I didn't realize it's a real thing. It is a real thing because your brain says, well, we're going to save energy. We're not going to bang our head against that wall anymore. And so then you start to change, skews the way you see the world, where you start to see setbacks as permanent, meaning that's the way it's always going to be, pervasive, meaning like in every aspect of my life, not just this one area where I had a setback, and personal, like, oh, it's my fault. And so that's part of the hopeful wiring that's going on in this biological spacesuit. So that's why the trauma-informed, quantum-informed is really important, because we can uninstall those encodings. We could coach people as servant leaders, as TQ leaders, as whatever you call yourself. You could help coach them to the learned optimism lens, which is realistic optimism. And optimism is a big part of any EI curriculum. So you could plug so much of this into what's already out there in terms of positive psychology, workplace wellness, even best practice. And we all have access to Chat GPT now. You can even ask Chat GPT, give me some research and some stats on, why laughter at work is helpful to the bottom line, or why humor, or why letting people have friends, or peer coaching, or whatever it is, right? You'll find the good information.
So Mensa says, so much appreciated, and Jim, keep up the good work. So yeah, they're getting it. And the thing is that this is the future that we're looking at. We're looking at circles, a different kind of leadership. Basically, it's not a pyramid structure anymore. It's a team structure, and where everyone's worldview, because there's almost 8 billion different holographic universes on Earth. Everybody has their own worldview, and if they all dialed it into a different unifying principle, which would be new values that are based on love. Thank you, Mensa. Then what I see is that we have a chance to really leave this, leave a different frequency, basically accessible, so that I keep going back to problem solving, because that's what I see us needing right now, is that the systems really need to be changed, and we don't really have, because all of his story is all violent. It's change through violence. I love change. That's why I said I was with the change enablement group. I was manager. So I really love change, but it's change for the better, and change that's more joyful, I guess is the right word. Is that right? What you
Absolutely.
said too?
Yeah. Change, like, same things, right? Love. It's all based on love. But more and more too, like, we see consumers caring about what their businesses stand for, more and more corporate social responsibility, more and more triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. I mean, I teach this stuff for the PMI.org, which is the Project Management Institute. I teach the PMP certification course so people could get their certification. And that's all in there. Servant leadership, emotional intelligence, making sure people are compensated fairly, and the triple bottom line, and being a good steward, being a diligent, respectful, and caring steward. It ripples in there. It ripples in ITIL, which is best practice service management. 90% of the Fortune 500 use ITIL. They talk about connecting your employees to purpose, and other things like that, and servant leadership and all of this. So, it's growing and growing and growing, and we can make it part of what we bring to the table, if it's our own business or even the business of being you. So like some of these things, it's like, in the workbook there, it's like, for my business, for the business I work for, or is it just the business of being me, right?
Yeah. So that's what I think. There's two things that are a part of this whole discussion that people may want to experience. The first is to realize that their body is trying to tell them something, that there is a communication between I have a wonderful healer friend, Fran Bailey, and she says the body doesn't lie.
Right.
And so the body is this, it's not like, just take an aspirin and go and don't worry about it. It's like, what's it saying? And then after that, then the access to the quiet mind, getting off our computers, getting off our devices, getting out in nature, or going and doing a meditation. So do you recommend meditation every day, or some other way to connect to the quantum self?
It depends. It also depends on where the person's at and what their preference is. Because if you have someone super stressed out and you ask them to sit still, there's gonna be like in their mind, right? I met someone. She says my body and mind are just screaming all the time inside, and you wouldn't know it from like looking at her. But yeah, I mean, meditation is great. There's so many different flavors. I love the non-dual meditation. I'll say, go to deconstructingyourself.com, and in the little menu you'll see the meditation series, and boom. And ever since that happened, I pay top dollar Patreon to Michael Taft, because I'm like, you gave this to me for free? The best thing ever. So
that's so cool. Scott Killaby is the one that introduced me to non-dual. But I apologize. But we're almost to the end of our thing. So, and I apologize because I do have to run today. I have an interview after this.
Nice.
So I'm going to have to run. But how's the best way for everyone to get a hold of you? And seriously, guys, you want this book. I know she said she just did it for Ions, but it's fabulous. And you'll just go, yes, yes, yes. And then you'll want to read a whole bunch of the books that she references. And here it's like I could write a whole list of books to read.
Yeah. I was trying to say, I took the kind of mishmash I had. It's like, wait, I'm just going to apply my strategic leader lens, and it just wrote itself.
It was fantastic.
I'm Jessika Jake on everything, for better or for worse. So my real self, Jessika with a K, Jake. So you can find me that way. Betterandbetter.com. There's a contact form, LinkedIn. Just say this is where you saw me. Also, if you do betterandbetter.com/IANDS, so IANDS, you'll see it's called the Dream Coaching, which incorporates havening. So you'll have to watch a little bit of videos on what havening is, but it replicates what Edison was doing in shifting his brain states without you actually having to fall asleep and scare the pants off yourself with a clang of ball bearings.
Okay, so that's better and better. Or I've had this up. I'll make sure it's in the description. And /IANDS, IANDS.
Yeah,
I do apologize.
The audio is literally right. You scroll a little, you'll see the audio right there.
Okay. Sorry. I got to rock. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Don't be sorry.
This is great. We'll talk more. I love what you're doing. I love it. Okay. Thank you, Jessika.